Hello, it's Suitonia here for eveiseasy. I want to go over the Executioner in a little more detail and explain its strengths and weaknesses and all the matchups you'll probably face in an Executioner. If you want to know a lot more about the skill points you need to fly to use the Executioner effectively, then head on over to my 20-day Executioner video where I go a little more in depth about the skills which are important there. You'll go from an Amarr rookie to an Amarr victor in no time. So we're going to be focusing on the assumption that we're flying with a much more skilled Executioner this time around, and I'm going to go more into depth about how the Executioner works with max skills versus other max skilled pilots in the matchup section. So I think the Executioner is a very strong ship because it can engage a wide variety of ships. It has good DPS throughout scram range, and it's also fast enough to slingshot kiters and to escape from heavier brawling ships which it can't engage, and to run the majority of gate camps in nullsec. The Executioner in particular excels at having excellent capacitor regeneration. Not only does it get a bonus which reduces turret cap usage, but it also has a powerful roll bonus which reduces scram and web activation cost by 80%. On top of that, it has room for a Nosferatu module and has incredible base regeneration. These traits combine to make the Executioner very good in longer drawn out engagements that other ships can struggle with, and it also makes it more forgiving for lower skilled pilots, which is why I did a guide for it for a 20-day character. So let's talk about the mechanics of pulse lasers and how you should be using them versus other ships. Typically, you'll want to be using Scorch against hybrid and autocannon ships, but using the higher damage ammo against missile ships, which is Conflagration and Imperial Navy Multifrequency. But this depends heavily on your opponent's fit. For example, longer range fits that try and kite in disruptor range, you'll typically want to rule down with Conflagration, even if it is a hybrid ship like a rail ship. The Executioner is a bit more tricky than the Kestrel to get a hang of, but when you do, you'll have a blast flying it. Remember that you can swap ammo instantly, and that swapping ammo usually only results in about a 1 second DPS loss. So make sure you swap crystals whenever there is an opportunity for you to be doing extra damage. Like when you have Scorch loaded but then the enemy ship managed to get closer to you, or in the opposite case when an enemy ship is close to you and he's pulling away, then swap from Conflagration or Imperial Navy Frequency to Scorch. The Executioner, true to its name, functions as an assassin. Your typical prey is killing kiting and tackle interceptors, as well as attack frigates and some brawling frigates. In order to use the Executioner efficiently, you'll need to know about slingshotting, which is a tactic used to try and get kiting ships into scram range. I've done a video on this before, and I'll leave a link to it. If you're not familiar with slingshotting, then please check out my slingshotting video, as it is a term which will be used throughout the matchup section. If you want to see some Executioner gameplay, then check out my nullsec Executioner full roam video, or my commentary video where I covered the Executioner, which I'll leave links to. We're now going to go over all the Executioner matchups and what you should normally be doing against each one of these ships. Let's look at some matchups in the Executioner. So starting with the Amarr Frigates, we have the Executioner, which is a mirror matchup obviously. I'd recommend brawling it in close to use your Nosferatu, because it's possible that the other Executioner might not have one, and to do max DPS. Assuming identical fits, obviously the winner is whoever has the highest skills, or maybe the best micromanagement. Remember to set your Ancillary Repairer to reload off. You might need to pulse it when you don't have any charges. Next one, Tormentor. This will be a difficult matchup because the Tormentor is a lot like you, except it has identical ship bonuses, but it has a full flow slot, and it has higher hit points, and it has a drone base, so it's stronger in scram range. If you do decide to engage a Tormentor, remember it does not have a utility high, so going close I'd recommend, even though it is stronger than you. You want to use your utility high as an advantage, because it's going to beat you at Scorch range anyway, and it has drones, so you want to go closer to lower the percentage difference of DPS. And you can use your NOS. Remember that the Tormentor doesn't have a utility high. It doesn't have the roll bonuses that you have to scram and webs, and it also has lower base cap regen. So you want to go in close. Tormentors sometimes, very often, they have higher tier weapons because the Tormentor has higher grid. So if you can orbit it and try to mitigate some of its DPS, you can sometimes win like that. And also remember, because you do have all these better capacitor abilities than the Tormentor, even if you screw up some of your own DPS, making it into a longer fight where his cap is going to be more of an issue and your cap isn't, is a good idea. And finally, the Punisher. The Punisher is tanky. The only time you're really going to see it is when it's some sort of like really cheap heavy tackler. It does only have 2 mids, and that's very important, and it is actually really slow as well. Punisher can probably beat you in a straight up duel, but you should be able to leave at any time. And my recommendation when fighting a Punisher would be to stay at 8 kilometers and use Scorch. That way, if friends come in, or if the Punisher is beating you, you can just leave. It only has 2 mids. Just make sure you are in position between the Punisher and the object that you can align out to. That way, if the Punisher's winning or Punisher's friends come in, you just align towards the object, you warp out. It shouldn't be able to keep you in the fight because you have a weapon, it doesn't. And also, another thing why you want to kite the Punisher at 8 kilometers is, remember, the Punisher needs cap a lot more than you do. And by staying outside Nosferatu range, you're going to deny him much more cap. Remember, the Punisher does not have an capacitor bonus for energy turrets like you do, and also it has lower cap regeneration, and it doesn't get your roll bonus either. So again, staying out of Nos range is going to hurt him a lot more than it's going to hurt you. And also, Punishers are sometimes fit with alternative weapon systems like autocannons or blasters. So again, kiting denies those off-spec weapons. Moving on to Caldari, the Condor. The Condor's often just a kiting ship that has some control modules like damps or tracking disruptors in the mids, and it tries to kite you at 20 kilometers with light missiles. And if you can catch it, you should be able to win against it. You might need to slingshot it a bit. It might be a bit difficult with your lower targeting range skills if you have lower skills to be able to slingshot it, because with damps it'll be able to put you down to 7 or 8 kilometers. But hopefully you should be able to catch one and kill one. And Rocket Condor, I don't think this is really that much of a worry for you, even if it does kite you at range. You should be able to beat it, but obviously you just want to go at 0 on a Condor to apply your max DPS, because it is a missile ship, and if you can use your Nosferatu as well, that's also a bonus. Against Orchestral, Orchestral is a very hard fight, I think. You want to approach it and get on top of it so you can use Conflagration and do maximum DPS, and you also want to use your Nosferatu as well to help keep your tank up. Try not to get Scram kited, as Orchestral will typically trying to be forcing you to use Scorch instead of your higher damage ammo, and he also wants to kite you outside your Nosferatu range. So Kestrel, you just want to get in close. The Merlin is normally a strong tank and spank ship. It has high DPS, high effective hit points at the same time, but it is slow and it doesn't have any damage application bonuses, so it has a hard time getting its damage onto you. So if you can kite it at 7 or 8 kilometers, you can win this fight pretty easily. If it is a rail Merlin, you might want to brawl it down instead, although if you start the fight at 8 kilometers, a rail Merlin is probably going to be able to kite you. But rail Merlins are pretty rare, especially in nullsec, so I would just kite it at 8 kilometers. And you should be able to just control it and keep it at range while you whittle it down without much problems. Gallente Frigates, the Aerator. The Aeron's really fast and it does high DPS with respectable projection too, because it has a fall-off bonus. So you want to kite this as much as possible with your Scorch ammo. If you notice it's a rail Aeron, brawl it down to 0 if possible. Kiting Aerons also do exist, so if you notice that Aeron's trying to orbit you at 20 kilometers or something, you can try and, if you catch it, you can win. The Aeron's very fast though, so it might be difficult with lower skills. And next up, the Tristan. The Tristan is very strong, and there's a lot of different variations of Tristans, but the most common ones in nullsec that I see are sort of scram brawlers with newts, kiters with drones, and a disruptor with a buffer, or off-spec DPS, like instead of newts they have rails basically. And you want to just stay outside NOS and newt range as much as possible, and also to avoid damage from off-spec guns. And against the kiting Tristan, you want to slingshot it and brawl it down. Tristan does have 40 meters cubed drone bay and 25 meters cubed bandwidth. You can kill the drones optionally if you want. If your web is not on the Tristan itself, you can put the web on a drone and then shoot the drone, and that should be able to track it and kill it. If you can get rid of the majority of his drones, then his DPS will be lowered dramatically. He'll just have probably some off-spec unbonused railguns or whatever he's got in his highs, and you can probably tank him from them, and then you'll probably either force him off or have a few attempts to catch him. So the Incursus is up next, and the Incursus is generally just a super tanked brick that can't do much DPS outside of 4 or 5 kilometers. Just want to kite it with Scorch, try and stay at 8 kilometers or so. The Incursus is slower than you. It's basically just an active armor tanked Merlin essentially, so you shouldn't have much trouble, and you can always leave. If he does have an injector again, and he's perma-tanking you, remember he only has a scram for control. You have a scram and web, so you can just leave the fight if you're at 8 kilometers or so. If it has rails, it might be a bit difficult for you. Against a rail Incursus, you can probably just leave, because again, you're faster than it. So, onto the Minmatar Frigates now. The Slasher is fast. Usually there are brawlers that try and take advantage of their low sig and high velocity, and they have a tracking bonus, and they often have tracking disruptors as well. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to leverage their tracking bonus and their low signature radius to be able to apply their DPS while you can't apply any of yours. Be careful of afterburner slashers. I would probably not engage a slasher unless I saw it had an MWD. But if it does have an MWD, you shouldn't have much problems with one. Remember, when you're fighting against tracking disrupting slashers, there's a sort of dance that you do. So if it's tracking speed disrupting you, all you're going to do is you're going to double click in space, load close range ammo, and just try and pull yourself away from it. Most slashers don't normally have more than 2 control mods, to be honest. Normally they have a medium shield extender or a medium ancillary booster as well. So if it doesn't have an afterburner, you should be able to pull away from it, or at least you should be able to track it by double clicking in space. If it loads range scripted TDs, you're gonna approach it essentially with still using long range ammo. And the cooldown on tracking disruptors, by cooldown I mean the activation timer, and why it's active, you can't change scripts, is 10 seconds. So generally, if you can just sort of dance around it a bit with the tracking disruptors, then you should be able to kill it easily. Tracking disruptors generally are pretty easy to deal with as long as you know what to do, you know what manual piloting you're doing. And yeah. The Rifter, you want to kite this at 8 kilometers. The Rifter does have a fall-off bonus, so it is kind of dangerous to you. But even still, at 8 kilometers or so, you're still going to force him into Barrage, which does less damage than Fusion. And he's also going to lose about, if it's not fall-off rigged, which is the Rifter I use, then it's going to lose about 70% of his DPS at 8 kilometers, maybe more. So just remember, when you're fighting against autocannons, the further away you are, the less DPS they're going to do, because the deeper they are in fall-off. So try and fight on the edge of your optimal, the edge of Scorch optimal. So against the Breacher, we want to brawl it down. Breachers are often just rocket ships that have really big active tanks. So just want to get on top of it. We want to use Conflagration if possible, or Imperial Navy Frequency, and also use our Nosferatu, because that's going to help us with our tank a bit more. The Breacher does have 10 meters cubed of drones, so sometimes it might be worthwhile for you to kill them if you can. If you're in a position to use a web on them, so you can track them to kill them. Although generally you'll want the web on the Breachers to keep him at 3 kilometers, so he doesn't pull away from you and force you to use Scorch instead. Some Breachers might be long range fit, but you can generally be able to catch one. And your game plan is essentially the same. You just want to brawl it down. It will be a very tough fight, I think, against a decent Breacher. But you don't really see too many Breachers in nullsec. So against the Navy faction ships, all of these are very hard fights, but they are possible. So the slicer, you can win this if you slingshot him, but it'd be very difficult, and a good slicer pilot will probably wreck you. It has almost identical speed to you. The slicer is probably a bit faster actually, and the slicer will have a higher gun tier than you. Normally they have a small focus pulse, you have dual light pulse, and you will have a slight tracking advantage. And you do have better native regeneration. You also have your Nosferatu as well, and you have your ship roll bonus. So if you can get on top of him, orbit him as tightly as you can, and just try and play the long game, where he will have capacitor issues running his tank, and he's going to be missing the odd shot, and hopefully your DPS is going on him a bit better than his DPS is going on you, then you can win this. But a good slice is probably just going to wreck you. I probably wouldn't take this fight unless the slicer just landed on you at 0. You can maybe try and bait some slicers by, if you see a slicer on grid, just warp to an obvious planet, then maybe the slicer will follow you to 0. You can also try maybe, if he does follow you and he doesn't land at 0, look at which range he came in, then warp to another planet at that range, and hopefully he'll warp to the same range again. Like, I don't know, if the slicer warp minus 30 kilometers, you will warp 30 kilometers to the next planet, and hopefully he lands on you, and then you can kill it. But it is, again, it's a very hard fight. Hookbill, I probably wouldn't engage a Hookbill in an Executioner. Hookbills normally have control with either they have 5 mids, so normally what they do is they have a double web and a TD or something like that, and they'll just scram kite you indefinitely. So I'd avoid this unless, sometimes you can kill a Hookbill if it lands on you at 0, but it's pretty rare, I think. Normally Hookbill will just put double web on you and start moving away from you with a range scripted TD. So even if you have it at 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers or so, you're going to be using Scorch on it, and it's going to get outside your Scorch range after about 10 to 15 seconds as well. So you're unlikely to win. But if you think it might be a bad fit and it lands on you at 0, go for it. The Comet is next, and Comet is a tough fight as well. It's fast, and it has 15 M3 of drones, so it's 15 meters cubed of drones with an extra flight as well. So it's hard to get rid of its DPS, and even if it's blaster fit and you're kiting at 8 kilometers, it's still doing 60 DPS or so of you if it has 3 hobgoblins on you. And also the rail comet is also incredibly dangerous, and I don't think you can beat a rail comet, even if you land on a rail comet at 0. If you can start the fight at 8 or 9 kilometers and you think it might be a bad fit, you can beat it potentially. And finally, it's the Firetail. It's a very tough fight. Artillery Firetail is a fight you probably can't win. Normally they have dual webs, and they'll be able to control you. They also have high DPS at range, and tracking is not an issue for artillery with dual webs, because they can just set your traversal to 0 by just double clicking in space, basically. And it also has more effective hit points than you, and similar rep. Even if you land on it at 0, your DPS is pretty much identical, even with artillery versus small pulse. And so I would avoid a artillery fighter if you know it has autocannons. Again, this is something with a lot of these faction frigates. If you look the pilot up on the kill board, see what fit they have, you can maybe decide to engage or not. So autocannon firetails, they are a lot weaker, I think, and you can win if you can kite at 8 kilometers. Firetails, autocannon firetails are often just buffer fit, so MWG Scram Web, medium shield extender, or maybe dual prop with a medium shield extender. And typically you should be able to beat them if you can keep them at 8 kilometers or so for long enough. They will be able to gain on you, especially the dual prop Firetail, but hopefully you can do enough DPS to whittle it down and kill it before it gets on top of you. And you have a good shot of beating a autocannon Firetail. But the artillery Firetail, you don't really have a chance of beating. So onto the pirate faction frigates, and again, like I said in the Kestrel video, I would avoid these almost all entirely unless you think it's a bad fit. So if you think the pilot is bad for whatever reason, or you think it might be a terrible fit, sure, go for it. But you don't have any real winning plays or advantages against any of these ships, and they're all incredibly dangerous to you. So don't engage, but If you believe and you think it's a bad fit, then sure, go for it. Okay, so now we're moving on to the Interceptors. The Crusader. A fight with a good Crusader is going to be almost impossible to win. It has better damage, better tracking, and more hit points than you. Fortunately, there doesn't seem to be that many good Crusader fits around. Normally they have a lot of speed mods for whatever reason. I don't know why. But against the Crusader, you should go in close. You want to use your Nosferatu. The Crusader does struggle with cap, and it needs to micromanage his cap quite a bit in extended engagement. So if you can waste his cap, again, I don't think the Crusader is going to have any problems tracking, because it does have a tracking bonus. It does have very high base speed. So you probably, but if you can mitigate some DPS by orbiting him, even if you're frying away all of your DPS, trying to whittle down the Crusader and throw away his cap can be to your advantage. And if you can make him waste some cap by burning for you before the engagement, then this might be possible. But it is a very risky engagement. A good Crusader is a very difficult fight, but it is a winnable fight, I think, if the Crusader has a bit of a dodgy fit, and you can maybe get him to waste some cap before the fight starts. So the Malediction, which is up next. The Malediction is usually just a rocket ship that's like a heavy tackler, because it has an armor resistance bonus. You want to go in close and use Conflagration or Multifrequency on it and also to use your utility high advantage, because the Malediction doesn't have a utility high. And you just want to make sure you just apply your max DPS to the Malediction so you can break through its tank, and also so it's not kiting you and forcing you to use Scorch. And up next is the Raptor, and the Raptor is basically just a fast Merlin with a optimal bonus, so a well fit one will be a tough fight. Kite at 8 or 9 kilometers and use Scorch to whittle it down. The Raptor does not get a tracking bonus, but it does have a scram web like you, so don't go in close. It won't have any problems tracking you. And you just want to kite at 8 or 9 kilometers with Scorch. You can definitely win this fight, but it will take a bit of a while. And up next is the Crow. The Crow is often a longer range tackler with light missiles, so you'll probably need to slingshot it. But if you can catch it, you can kill it, and then you can just brawl it down at 0. And that's what you want. You just want to brawl it down at 0. Get your NOS on it. Use Conflagration or Multifrequency for max DPS. And Rocket Crows are a bit more rare, but you should be able to beat a Rocket Crow at 0. Just don't let it kite you. If it uses its missile velocity bonus and its longer range scram intelligently, a Rocket Crow can definitely kill quite a few Tech 1 frigates, but a lot of Crows generally aren't very well piloted, in my opinion. So a Crow is normally a ship that you can definitely kill. It's probably one of the easiest interceptors for you. And onto the Tyrannus. A good dual prop Tyrannus will eat you up for lunch. I mean, when it's heating its afterburner, it'll be 400 meters per second faster than you while heating afterburner. So even if you catch him at like 10 kilometers at heated scram and web range, he can still be on top of your face in 15 seconds. Tyrannus with a web seems to be a lot more common now, fortunately, and people tend to prefer them with an ancillary rep for some reason. I don't know why people use them over the dual prop Tyrannus. But you can perfectly control a web Tyrannus because you will have near identical speeds. Tyrannus base speed is 525 meters per second. Your base speed is 513 meters per second. So that means there's only 12 meters per second difference between your speeds. And actually, when you both web each other, there's actually only 6 meters per second. So the reality is, if you can catch a web Tyrannus at 8 kilometers, you both web each other. Now, it's going to take him about half an hour before he's actually on top of you. So, because for him to move just 1 kilometer, it will take over 2 minutes, because there's only only going 6 meters per second faster than you. So again, if you can start a fight with web Tyrannus in heated scram range, you can most likely kill it. I would look at Tyrannus up on a kill board before engaging, because again, a good dual prop Tyrannus is just going to completely wreck you. But web Tyrannus, easy peasy if you can get it at 9 kilometers. And next we have the Ares, or the Ares. The Ares just tends to be a fast tackler. If it stays at long range, you may need to slingshot it. If it comes in close range, then just kite it with Scorch. It doesn't have a damage bonus, but 3 unbonused blasters can hurt, so just don't Prometheus it, don't approach it at 0, and you should be fine. And onto Minmatar Interceptors, the Claw. This is going to be a long fight, but it's definitely one that I think you can win. Claws tend to have high armor hit points. They can fit a big plate, 200 or 400, quite easily because it has an excessive amount of grid. And it has good EM resistances as well, especially on armor. Even though it's an interceptor, it's still going to take a very long time for you to kill it. Your game plan against the Claw is just to stay at 8 kilometers. Remember, the Claw only has 2 mid slots, so you should be able to control it perfectly. And again, this is kind of like the Punisher, and any sort of ship that has 2 mids and has less control on you. You can always try it, right? Like, you can always just stay at 8 kilometers. If he starts beating you, no problem. Line out, warp off. If his friends come in, line out, warp off. So, again, the Claw doesn't have a fall-off bonus, and it can't really do that much DPS to you. It's only going to be doing about 50-60 DPS to you. You should be able to pretty much just tank that, even on your Ancillary, when it doesn't have any charges. So hopefully you can just bring it down. If it doesn't have any friends around in the system, you should have enough time to kill it. And again, you can always run from a Claw if it starts beating you, or if friends are coming in. Just make sure you check directional scanner while you're fighting a Claw. And finally, the Stiletto. Stiletto is a weak ship in terms of 1 versus 1 because it has 2 turrets. Even though it does have a damage bonus, it only has 2.5 effective turrets essentially. You can kite it if you want. Technically, in a 1v1 duel scenario, you'll want to kite it with Scorch, but more likely, because the Stiletto is just a pure tackler, they're never solo. Essentially, you just want to brawl it down. Even though you're going to take more DPS by doing it, you want to do max DPS. Just want to drop Stilettos as fast as possible so you can kill them before their gangmates come in. So finally onto the Assault Frigates. I honestly wouldn't engage any Assault Frigate in your Executioner. It'll be incredibly challenging. There are 3 that I think you have slightly better chances against, and by slightly better I think you have a very small chance of beating. So those are the Harpy, the Jaguar, and the Enu. Now, the Harpy is like a super Merlin. It has an extra optimal bonus. Then it has better shield HP. Then it has Tech 2 resistances. It's probably going to be able to out damage you, even if you kite it perfectly at 9 kilometers. If it uses null with blasters, so it's going to be a very difficult fight. So if you can maybe find a Harpy that's bad and loads Void against you for whatever reason. Sometimes when people are fighting take-on frigates in Assault Frigates, they assume it's just going to be a super easy fight and they're not going to have to do much and it's just going to be easy. So I don't know, if you warp to a planet at minus 10 kilometers or something, maybe the Harpy will follow you and he'll have Void or something. Assuming you're going to be easy fight, then you can try and kite him at 9 kilometers. Harpy has 4 mids. Normally one of those mids is going to be a medium shield extender. So it should only have a scram and web, like you'll have a scram and web. And it does have a slower base speed than you, so again, it might be trial and error. Just start the fight at the very edge of overheated scram and web range, and just see if you can do it or not. If you can't, then you might be able to leave. It'd be pretty dangerous though. Against a rail Harpy, if it's sort of a gang fit rail Harpy, if you warp to planet 0 and then the Harpy follows you at 0 or something, then you can probably kill it if you orbit it at 500 meters. But you have to know it has rails first. Jaguar, in my opinion, is the worst assault frigate in the game. It doesn't have very good DPS at all. Normally, Jaguars, they either have a medium shield extender or medium Ancillary booster, and the reason why the Jaguar is bad, it just has very bad damage projection. It has the worst damage projection out of all of the assault frigates because it only has an optimal bonus, which is useless for autocannons, which is how Jaguars are typically fit. So you just want to kite the Jaguar at 9 kilometers or so, but the Jaguar has a pretty huge. It typically has a pretty huge tank for an assault frigate normally, and it has very high EM resistances, so this is going to be a very long fight. I mean, I've killed a Jaguar and an Executioner before on my main character, and it took me about 3.5 minutes to kill it. And so if the Jaguar has friends at all, you won't be able to kill it. If you can catch a bad one alone, maybe you can kill it. But again, the Jaguar doesn't do much DPS at 8 or 9 kilometers at all, so if you can find one 1v1 alone, then maybe you can kill it, but I still think it's very unlikely. And finally, the NU, if it has blasters, it only has one optimal bonus, but it will be a longer fight. And I actually have a video up on my channel, which is an Executioner versus a NU fight that I had, where I won with 6 structure hit points. So that probably tells you how close this fight is. Again, you know, if you think the NU might be bad and he's going to load Void, then okay, you know, maybe warp to a planet -10. NU's probably just going to warp to 0, thinking you're an easy kill, and have Void or Antimatter loaded, and you can maybe get some free DPS on him while he reloads to null if he's any good. Again, I think you should judge all of these on a case-by-case basis, and you know, probably want to look up the fits on the kill board before, you know, see how experienced the pilot is before you engage. And that's all the common matchups I think you'll be having.